message is police detention for the Russian-born billionaire founder of Telegram. It's a mad, 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 mad world in the age of SaaS, and someone is trying to defriend Facebook big time with an unfollow button in federal court. That and much more on Wednesday's edition of Techstrong Gang. You're watching Techstrong Gang, and boy, do we have an eclectic episode for you today with a fabulous panel. I'm John Swartz, a roving Silicon Valley reporter filling in what amounts to an almost impossible task. I'm trying to fill in for the fabulous Alan Schimmel, who is traveling somewhere on a plane as we speak, and the great Mike Bizarre, who is in Las Vegas. It's Corey. And Mike Bizarre, who's in Las Vegas covering the VMware Explorer show. Before we start, I want to introduce you to our sterling panel. And we're going to start going from west to east. And we begin with the voice you just heard and the face you just saw. Longtime friend, colleague, and Bay Area resident, Corey Johnson, Chief Market Strategist for the Futurum Group. Hey, Corey.
Right here in downtown San Francisco. It's a beautiful morning. So it's a funny thing when I listen to the East Coast radio, I get ready for the stock market to open, and the sun is just barely coming up here.
Same thing here. Yeah, I'm always worried about the lighting in the room for this show because it's pitch black and then all of a sudden it becomes light. So we're okay. We're good here in San Francisco Bay Area. So as the crow flies, we're going to move to Texas and our editor extraordinaire, Amanda Rosani, who is enduring some stifling heat without air conditioning. Is that true? And how are you holding up, Amanda?
Doing okay. It's amazing how much heat I can handle. But we actually got a cold front come in today. It's going to be only 89 degrees. Woohoo!
Oh, jeez.
Wow. Cold snap. And finally, we land in Charlotte, North Carolina with one of our newest members, Hope Lynch, who is a developer doyen of sorts. Hey, Hope, how are you doing today?
I am doing well here in Charlotte, and the way my brain works, I think it's great how we have both coasts and right in the middle, right? So couldn't have planned that better.
It's heating up. It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's hot. It was hot here yesterday. It was.
It's been cool.
Yeah.
Shipped it.
I used to live in the South a long time ago, and I could never get used to the humidity. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah. So we're going to start with the detention of the Russian-born billionaire founder of Telegram, a messaging app known for its unfiltered contents. So Pavel Durov was detained at a Paris airport Saturday on a warrant related to Telegram's lack of moderation. He was traveling to Paris inbound on his private jet. It's interesting. The circumstances behind his arrest, according to the French president, Mr. Macron, it was in relation to an ongoing judicial investigation that was in no way a political decision. So I'm going to start with Corey. Corey, I admit I use Telegram, but not too deeply. What can you tell us about this and what's going on with this entire arrest and what it might say about freedom of speech or illegal content?
Telegram is one of those things to me like WhatsApp, where you have enormous global usage that is not really a lot of Americans. So Telegram's got about 950 million users right now, rapidly approaching 1 billion. And it has evolved for those who maybe have dabbled or remembered when Telegram launched as a service for sending messages, WhatsApp style, or maybe even a company that launched its own crypto token, which it did, raising $1.7 billion, which it then had to give back to investors and pay a fine of, I think, $18.5 million to the SEC. That all happened. And then it evolved into kind of both a messaging app as well as a thing where there's kind of like Facebook groups, but those groups can be up to 100,000 people or so. So there are very big active groups on Telegram discussing everything from cat videos to child pornography. Terrorists have been on Telegram and used Telegram to communicate with each other. And there's QAnon and anti-vax groups and some really dark stuff on there. And so this is, without judgment, that is what Telegram is. It's a place where people exchange messages and a place where people like-minded people get together and talk about things. It is also a place where the messages on Telegram are not encrypted end-to-end. Some of them are, if you pay extra. And the speculation in the Telegram community, and people are really upset about this, is that the government has asked them, just as they did with Apple so many years ago, ask for a backdoor, ask for a way to be able to get through the encryption and see what people are saying. It's not so much that Telegram isn't turning over information about bad behavior. I wish I had a better phrase for child porn, but the horrible and disgusting and evil things, people who are communicating their horrible, disgusting, and evil thoughts and practices, but also the private messages that are encrypted and Telegram doesn't even see those, doesn't even have the ability to see those. There is speculation that the company and the founder refused to enter into discussions about whether they would allow a backdoor or anything else. And the French government's pissed. And he's a French citizen. When he fled Russia, he acquired French citizenship. He also acquired, reportedly, a citizenship in the UAE, where he lives and posts a lot of shirtless videos and pictures of himself. Have you seen his Instagram account?
I have not, fortunately.
It's jaw-dropping. The guy's ripped, and he's posting lots of pictures of himself. He's got a lot more. As he gets older, he has more and more darker hair, which is something I have failed to achieve. But to me, it's really interesting from a million angles. There's the technological angle. How is this company run? Where are its what is its technical stack, both software and hardware? A service this large has got to have an infrastructure this large, and yet in the IT communities, I think we hear very little about it. But it's also interesting from a free speech standpoint. This isn't news that you have a right to free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And yet you have the Elon Musks of the world out there now, conservative talk radio in the US, going nuts about this. They want to take your right to speech. They want to take your free speech. And it is an argument that is as old as America, at least, is what responsibility comes with free speech, and is being relitigated with this news story.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Telegram. I wasn't using it, but I got a notification. This will give you an idea of the lack of moderation or filtering that goes on. I have a dear friend who passed away a year and a half ago. She just joined Telegram, evidently, which kind of brings up to the question of who is monitoring this. It's just kind of
that is quite a technology stack. That's really good. I thought only churches and schools had that. You knew.
And it's like, it kind of, you mentioned Musk, which is interesting. There is that parallel, right? And I think the difference here is that in Europe, they're much more aggressive, I think, especially around privacy-focused issues. In the US, we basically have, without getting too political, we have Musk meddling in a not too subtle way in the presidential election with the use of X. Is this kind of a inflection point, perhaps? I don't know. Anyone wants to weigh in on this, but is this an inflection point of some sort with what's going on in France, perhaps having an impact on what's going on in the US with X?
I think the cultural landscape is still very different between the EU and the US right now, as far as how they look at regulation and what things that they're going to, let's say, crack down on, right? I think in the EU, they are more accustomed to having much tighter regulation than in the US. Some people have even pointed that as to one of the reasons why some people from the EU and other countries come to the US to start a business, because it's just easier to get a business off the ground because of lack of regulation. However, if there is some crisis point that can be clearly pointed to, like I think years ago, speaking of the election, Facebook, had the whole crisis around that third-party company that was paid to find certain information. Yeah. Something like that you would think would be enough. I think it's going to be a much, much tougher road to get something like that in the US. Maybe individual instances Like, Kim.com, he's finally being extradited, right? That's 12 years right. In the making.
Wow, I forgot about that story.
Yeah, but, tied to technology and technology use, it's going to be slow going in the U.S.
So there was this platform was complicit, as Corey alluded to, that they were aiding money launderers, drug traffickers. I also even heard something along the lines of DDoS bots were proliferating. Do you know much more about that, especially the DDoS angle, Hope?
Their company's argument is that they are a marketplace for whatever people want to talk about, and their private communications are whatever their private communications are. And I don't know the ins and the outs, but what they do to promote things and what their algorithms surface and what they don't surface, and what their content moderation is. But they say that they abide by all of the regulations in Europe, that they do share information with law enforcement. Well, they haven't said that explicitly, but they've said that they abide by all the laws in Europe, and that they have nothing to hide. Again, I think it's so interesting that with every generation, we relitigate and re-argue the things that we've already decided as a society, and technology has provided a place for that, because free speech is really different when you can broadcast your speech much widely, where I can send out a tweet about the latest workday earnings to the whole world from the comfort of my desk, and without I don't even need the help of all of my friends and colleagues to get that going. But there's also this pernicious effect that we saw in particularly during COVID, and maybe the 2 election cycles ago, where we saw Nazis and racists get together and find groups of like-minded people. We found mentally ill people imagining their own illnesses. We found anti-vax people getting together and talking amongst themselves, and so active in the discussion that they were posting so much that we know now that the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube were pushing more of that information to those people because they would remain more engaged. And that outrage, the technology stack rewards the outrage that is great business for the Facebook shareholders of the world and companies like Telegraph, but maybe not so great for our society.
Yeah, that's what I think needs to be addressed. And I will say, when I read this article, my first initial reaction was, I dabbled in Telegram a little bit, but my initial reaction was, it was no surprise, because I felt it was kind of shady, and I don't tend to use it. But yeah, it's a real issue how the algorithm pushes that kind of content, and we do need to address that.
We'll see how that affects the long-term business model and the value of these things, right? Like Twitter is we don't know it to be an existential crisis, but we know that the users have plummeted. We know that the costs have also fallen, but so has the service problems. You saw this with Elon Musk's ill-fated interviews with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Republican nominee Donald Trump, where they couldn't even get the service up. And you have to say, well, this guy who thought it was a great idea to fire vast numbers of our technical employees who keep the thing up and running is now finding that the only way to grow or even hold the users that he has, and then the numbers have fallen, is by readmitting all of the people who were banned for good, in my mind, my political statement, good reason.
Right. They're all coming back, right? Exactly, because they got to prop up their audience, because they're really not getting much of advertising there, and if anything, they're just losing name advertisers. That's been its ongoing struggle they've had for a couple of years. It's just one last thing, just kind of one final thought, is that we've got these several examples of these billionaires running these social media platforms that have just turned into kind of morasses of just, I don't even know what to say. It's disjointed debate and dialogue and some really bad actors. I hate that phrase, but it's true on these sites. I guess, is that something we're just going to have to endure until something is done in a legislative form, or just beyond that?
It looks like, at least as far as Twitter's results go, it looks like gravity is working. That the more of a cesspool that Twitter becomes, the fewer people want to write checks to Twitter, and the fewer people want to be on the service at all. And you see the slow and steady growth of threads. You also see, not just advertisers voting with the money with Twitter, but you're starting to see that as it relates to Tesla sales, where people who are concerned about the environment and concerned about the issues associated with the environment are also concerned with the behavior of Elon Musk and not willing to buy his electric car, some people, because of his political stance. And so he is reaping what he has sown.
Yeah, that's
true.
Biblical. Yeah, but employees are leaving companies too because they don't agree with the behavior of the companies and the reputations of them. But that's a topic for another day. Hey, thanks. That's a good discussion. We'll be moving on to topic 2 in just a moment. Welcome back to Techstrong Gang. There was a survey of nearly 1,300 DevOps professionals who are building and deploying applications on top of the Salesforce software as a service platform. And they found that more than half work for organizations that have embraced continuous integration, continuous development platforms, with another 28% planning to adopt. The survey also found 59% of respondents working for organizations either have already adopted or are planning to adopt version control, while 54% have implemented automated testing. Hope, can you sort through this and explain to us what this all means?
Yes. I think it is fascinating that we can still have a conversation about SaaS in a semi-incredulous way, even in this day and age, right? As long as we've had SaaS environments. But the rapid adoption of DevOps in SaaS environments, and highlighted by platforms like Salesforce, right? I think it shows an evolution in software development and IT operations that is continuing. It's been going for some time, maybe exacerbated by the pandemic, but businesses more and more are relying on SaaS solutions. They are looking for scalability. They're looking for flexibility. For some, it's driving them toward, how can we be cost effective? But, news alert, news flash, SaaS doesn't automatically save you money. But integrating those practices so that they can streamline their software delivery, hopefully be more collaborative, especially if they have distributed teams, and hopefully have higher quality applications. But how do they deal with the challenges? Because this can bring some really complex tool chains. If you're using SaaS, you're integrating tooling from a lot of different vendors, and it is not on-prem. You cannot see the infrastructure. Maybe you can't touch any of the back end. How do you make sure you have security and compliance across these distributed systems? And what about vendor lock-in, right? You have a vendor you really are relying upon, but you don't have a way to change, or maybe the egress costs are just so high that it doesn't make business sense for you to move. And one of the big pieces to me also is the security, because now you're looking at shared responsibility between you and the SaaS vendor. How do you ensure that you don't have security gaps, especially if you have a vendor, hopefully that's not as responsive and not giving the right information that you need to be able to make your security decisions. But it is interesting, again, that SaaS is still such a high point of conversation, even in this day and age.
We sit in a different place, right? Like we're technologists. We work with the technology, and almost by definition, that's cutting edge. But when I'm always amazed when I talk to companies, as I do every day, and I hear about, with exceptions, but I hear about digital transformation, and I'll say, what does that mean? It means taking things off of paper and going to. I'm like, real? That still is really happening, right? And the answer is yes. Like I'm in the tower, the White Tower. I'm in the Ivory Tower. I'm in the Ferry Building. There's a giant clock tower above my white clock tower above my head. But I'm in this place in San Francisco and in this mindset where I'm thinking about AI. I'm thinking about the transition from 800 gigabits to 1600 gigabits optical transport in a data center. I'm thinking that I'm not thinking much about SaaS, and yet the rest of the world is chugging along and making these changes still that I stopped thinking about.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to say it's funny because we usually are the first movers. We see it first. We hear about it first. And like you're saying, other things come in and fill it in, and we don't really give it a second thought. But please continue.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how there are so many companies that are still in that process of basic moving to the cloud and moving away from certain legacy systems and things like that. And we get into that debate. Are they really, is it digital transformation, or are they just finally digitalizing?
It's funny that you mentioned security issues, Hope, because we used to do a story from App Omni did a survey of about, I think it was 650 organizations in 6 countries. And basically they found that a third of them have had some sort of SaaS breach, and nearly half of those corporate victims had more than 2,500 employees, which is kind of staggering when you think about it. It's in a sense, SaaS apps have become kind of they're a system of record. I think most cloud app spending is on SaaS, and because SaaS apps have become a system of record, or at the center of how business is conducted, it has also become a prime target of cyber criminals. Is that probably what we're going to see more of? Is this continues to grow?
I do think that is possible. And, there are those handy tools online where you can go and query and see what the tool stack is at organizations. And maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. But if I am a cyber criminal and I know I found a vulnerability.
You're denying now? You've got an alibi.
I've got it out.
If I was a cyber criminal, she said.
If operative word. Now, I'm narrowing my targets, and especially if, they find a way that they can impact multiple organizations at once. I think it is a big threat, and it does put more responsibility on the SaaS vendors, and some of them, maybe litigation fees are going to reach the point. Maybe they'll make some hard decisions, but it's tough. But one of the other pieces that I think is interesting around this move to SaaS is there are still a lot of issues potentially around regulatory compliance, right? So some organizations, if you're looking at GDPR, if you're looking at HIPAA, compliance in a SaaS environment can be challenging when that data is distributed across multiple cloud providers, multiple jurisdictions, is a part of your business in the EU, a part of your business in the US, a part in countries in South America. The regulatory requirements are going to be so different, but now you want to provide single access through this one SaaS provider to everyone. Some SaaS providers can't do that. And it's just such a tough problem to untangle. I think it's great that it's opening up options for smaller businesses, smaller organizations, some who would not have been able to get off the ground making an on-prem investment and trying to scale that investment over time. the flexibility you get with SaaS is a game changer for a lot of businesses that probably would not have existed if not for it. But still, so many considerations.
There's this. I'll mention it one more time, I guess. The State of SaaS Security 2024 report mentions these confluence of security challenges like decentralization, inconsistent enforcement, lack of clear responsibilities, and also the fact that only 15% of organizations have security teams that manage SaaS. Is it more? Let me ask you, Hope, just as a professional who really knows this well, is your greatest concern security, or is it regulation, or is it, on top of everything else that you have to worry about?
I think in this day and age, the greatest concern is security. And especially if I am in a highly regulated industry, those regulatory requirements make me even more concerned about security. If I'm not in a highly regulated organization,
finance, healthcare,
insurance, any of those, yes, security moves to the top. If I'm highly regulated, security moves to the top. If I'm not highly regulated, security moves to the top. Security wins no matter which direction.
Okay. All right. Hey, interesting conversation. Thanks again for your insight. And we're going to move on and talk a little bit about Facebook, our old dear friend, in the next segment coming up.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Welcome back to Techstrong Gang. There's a lawsuit in federal court that would conceivably let billions of Facebook users unfollow friends, groups, and pages in one fell swoop with an unfollow button. Just a click of the button, and they're all gone. And as you can imagine, Meta, which is the company that owns Facebook, runs Facebook, is probably terrified. No, they are terrified. I talked to them about it. So there's a professor, a public policy professor on the East Coast, Ethan Zuckerman, who's attempting to resurrect this browser extension that was invented by someone else. He's calling it Unfollow Everything 2.0. And he wants to bring this as an option to the billions of Facebook users. And in a sense, kind of upend the way things are done there. Facebook is going to fight him in court. And it brings me to this, Amanda. I believe this kind of movement. Do you think a lot of people would use that button if given the choice?
Absolutely. I think when you're talking about from the customer experience angle, many people will be very happy to have this as an option. I know I feel like 1,500 friends. I have about 1,500 Facebook friends. And I feel like trying to go through all those and find the ones that either aren't even on Facebook anymore that I'd like to clear out would be too much trouble, or going through to find ones I don't even know. I mean, how many of you have Facebook friends you don't even know how they ended up there? And I would love to try to filter through my list, but it would take so long. So, and then all the groups you get invited to over a period of years just stack up and you get all those alerts. So in my mind, I'm sure that this will be a wonderful service for most of the users to clear out and filter through all these groups and friends and all that, and kind of narrow it down to what they're really interested in seeing. But of course, on the other side of that, I do see how Meta would not be happy with this. But, coming from a customer and user experience, I would think they need to take that in consideration.
I mean, isn't the value of as a user, the value of the network is also the network, right? And I guess what you're arguing for is kind of what we started talking about with Telegraph, which is the quality, is a smaller, higher quality audience more valuable than a large audience? And I think in some of these things that people tend to use, Facebook, which I think a lot of people use with family and close friends, and not the distant. I have a story. So I used to work at Bloomberg, and I was on the set a lot, and I would run from the set to grab something from my desk or to get something to drink. And this cameraman who was close friends with would play practical jokes and put something shocking on my screen, so that when I came back and they would count down 3, 2, 1, you're on camera, and I look at my monitor right below me, and there'd be some ridiculous note or some obscene website or something. And it was a running joke, and it was getting irritating, but I don't want to tick off my cameraman because it's taking care of me. And I came to find quite a while later that I was following on Twitter hundreds of really weird accounts. Like, how did this, like, someone buy an account that I was following? Till I called up this cameraman who we no longer work together. And he's like, I've been waiting for this call for years. Because he followed all these accounts. I don't, I've got a pretty active Twitter account, so I don't really pay attention to it so much. But yeah, the surgical strike of who you follow and who you don't is pretty hard to.
You mentioned, Corey.
It's easy to surgically remove one at a time. It's not easy to remove the hordes that you might want to.
Yes, and then you're talking about that amount of time. And, I know some people with like 5,000 friends, and then that gets even harder, and 300 groups to sort through.
Oh, can I tell you?
My friends would like to remove me a lot.
Can I tell you guys a story? This was about 2017. Remember, there was a major breach of Facebook. Like, millions of people had to change their passwords. It's like a couple million. I was one of them. You know what? In a sense, that was a blessing, because at the time, I had like way too many friends. I had like 3,500 friends, and without offending anybody, I did not want to just defriend them. That created all sorts of problems back then. So what I basically did was I couldn't change the password. I just decided not to change the password and start a whole new Facebook profile using that as kind of an excuse. I mean, it's less than half now. My number of friends is less than half than what it used to be. But
I feel so much closer to you now, Schwartz, because you've now twice chosen to be my friend.
Well, no, I would never consider like taking you out of the equation. But remember, Corey, what was the name of that social network where you only could have 50 friends? I can't remember the guy's name. Yeah. Dave. I remember he thought that it would work because isn't there like the sociological or study that shows that most people have 50 friends? Well, it's the Kevin
Bacon math, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. And
it's not true. There are some people who are that thesis is that some people are the connectors who have an inordinate amount of friends, and if you're connected to that person, then you are suddenly connected to so many, and that is the math that powers. It's a basic math that powers Facebook itself and Instagram, but more Facebook, where your connections make your connections more valuable.
Yes.
One thing.
Go ahead. And the value ascribes to Facebook. Sorry, Hope.
I'm wondering your opinions on that occurred to me in thinking this topic over. Facebook is a free service. You are the product when you are on Facebook. Your data, your connections, your friends. So now there is this case which is about digital rights, user autonomy and control over my personal interactions, but on a service that I have given $0. So what are my rights other than my contractual rights when I signed up that I probably gave away? So I am interested in how that will be approached when and if, this court case is in motion.
Well, you pay, you just don't pay with cash.
Exactly. But at least in the US, right, that contract is usually taken more seriously if I've handed over even $1.
Oh, by the way,
that is a good point.
Yes, that is a good point. Dave Morin was the guy I was thinking about with the 50. But yeah, that's interesting. When you listen to Corey, you and I went through this when we would talk to Sheryl Sandberg all the time, right, about Facebook, and she'd say, "Oh, the more you write, the more engaged you are." But it feeds into the algorithms and feeds into the data and feeds into their bottom line. Yeah, I don't know about the rest
I
of
used to
you.
keep track of. So whenever Mark Zuckerberg was called up to speak in Washington and testify before Congress, I kept track of, and then later when I was no longer a journalist, started buying shares in Meta, Facebook and Meta, whenever he was testifying before Congress, because the stock always tanked, and it always came back, and it was, and it worked for years and years and years, and it stock's at 500 right now. That's long after the splits and everything else, and this business of letting users create a network for Facebook and create content to bring people onto Facebook so they can sell ads, and using algorithms to promote the things that get people most intrigued is working quite well for Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were never afraid. I mean, that was, this is maybe another topic, but they were never afraid. He in particular was never afraid of breaking something and then reinventing it. Like all the features they would add over the years were initially hated or despised and then became the most popular features. Meanwhile, poor Jack Dorsey over at X, or Twitter at the time, was paralyzed. He wouldn't change anything. You couldn't even edit your own tweet after you sent something out. And in a sense, it became dull and stultifying and in the state of where it is now versus Facebook, where they actually had fresh ideas and kept things moving. One thing I was going to point out with this lawsuit is that it's based in part on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act that gives people like us control over how they access the internet. This is like one of those, there's just those flashpoints where every social media company is terrified that they're no longer going to be protected by that. Yeah. And which shields them from liability in terms of what third parties say.
They're sensitive to that too with this latest iteration of things too. I was working on something with this Telegraph thing, and I was trying to create some visual elements to help a producer at News Nation. I did an appearance on News Nation yesterday to talk about Telegraph, and I entered in the information into Gemini, Google's Chat GPT competitor, and I entered the information in and asked if it could reformat all these things that I'd written and change them into essentially TV graphics, and it came back and said that it could that Gemini was unable to write about politics right now and elections, which this wasn't really about, but it wouldn't give me an answer because someone at Google said this is not the time for us to make headlines about what our AI is doing. Yes.
That's interesting because we had a discussion on this show, I think it was last week, where we talked a little bit about Google, and part of what we said was deemed not presentable on YouTube. So in a sense, there's like a form, it wasn't censorship, but they basically went above and beyond in terms of filtering the content, and it kind of in a sense is kind of a good thing in that they caught it. It wasn't nothing nefarious, but it kind of was reassuring versus, as what we've been talking about earlier, what we see on Telegram or on X, where it's just anything goes. So would any of you object to using the unfollow button of everything?
I would not.
I think people want it. They should have it.
Yeah, I would think that most people would appreciate the button. I would use it. And I'm also sitting here thinking, I know Meta doesn't like this. They're fighting it. But then on the other side of this, I think, well, what if everybody did filter down to exactly the friends, exactly the pages, the groups they wanted to follow? Couldn't Meta take that data and essentially be able to advertise more direct, appropriate content to certain groups that would align better if everybody was more, able to do that and they were more narrowed down? They could take that data and do something with that.
Twitter has taken that approach in the past, letting you have different groups and different that you follow. But Facebook has for whatever reason, they've figured out the math isn't there for them.
Yeah, because some of the ads I've seen, it's not for any product or service I have any interest in. It's just there's someone out there. So nuke it all and just warn the people I care about.
Let God sort it out. There we go.
Yeah. And then come back and add those few back in. But what a pleasant experience, right? I'm seeing the things I care about from the people I care about. Now, if those connections don't do that, though, I'm still going to be mildly impacted because it's going to bleed up. But it's going to be a somewhat a degree of improvement. But if your friends are like-minded, it's probably going to be a lot better.
I don't think there's as much of a stigma about defriending or just pruning your friends now as there were as it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Do you agree? I mean, Facebook is not as just essential to people as it was. It tends to skew towards older folks. I don't think people take it personally as if you were to do that.
Thanks. I think
my kids know you're wrong. My teenagers, they pay very regular attention to who follows, who stops following somebody, who changed something, who posted. I posted a picture dropping my son off at USC last week, and he couldn't be bothered to call me ever. He was on the phone in seconds. Take that down. It's so embarrassing. And people are lighting me up. I'm like,
I saw that post, by the way. I did see that. I saw you were at USC.
I'm old. My friends are old. My Instagram followers, my old friends. No, my friends follow you too. I'm getting lit up. The picture. Him standing between his mom and I.
That's great. You caused the scandal. I love it.
You know him, John.
Who's that?
He's a nice guy.
Oh, yeah. I know. I met him right at the football game. Right.
What's the problem with this? It's a nice picture.
That is a great picture.
It is wonderful.
That is a great picture. My daughter uses Facebook a little bit. She's more of an Instagrammer and Snapchatter. And I do those very little, so we're kind of opposite there. And then my son, though, he's 14, and he is definitely not into any of those social channels. He's more about TikTok and YouTube.
Right. My son's the same way. It's funny because my daughter, who has kids, specifically asked us never to post photos of their kids on Facebook or on X, anything like that. So out of respect, I don't do that. And it got me into this kind of habit of posting less. As much as I'd like to, and I was told sometimes by my younger son that I shared too much. He got mad at me for posting something on X to trying to help him with the story. He immediately saw it and told me to take it down. So yeah, Corey, I feel your pain because this is something. But again, Amanda, my son Christopher used TikTok all the time. I mean, he would never even consider using some of the stuff I use, and it's generational.
I hear that, and I wonder because for me, I am rarely on Facebook, Instagram daily, Reddit a few times a week, TikTok, yes, YouTube every day. So if you told me Facebook would go away, never to come again, I'd be like, all right.
So I have a friend who worked within Facebook, and they left on fairly bad terms. And she's on there. I'm not going to use it as much as I used to, but religiously uses Instagram constantly. It's the same company. I mean, there's a differentiation, but still it's the same company. And she left on bad terms with the company, but that's the exception. So yeah, we're different strokes, different folks. Any other? I think it has to do with
what content you're most interested in, and then the vibe that you mesh with the most.
Exactly. Well put. Well, a good way to end it, actually, Amanda. Hey, thanks everybody. This was great. We did miss you, Alan and Mike, but we can live without you. We did it without you. So until next time. This is Techstrong Gang. We'll see you tomorrow, Thursday, the rest of the week. Have a great week, everybody. And thanks for tuning in.